What's up, YouTube? Finally back at home, which means we get to enjoy some nice t-shirt weather. Today we're working on the 05 F150. This is my dad's truck. We got a little bit of a laundry list to do. We gotta get an oil change done, a blower motor resistor. He's got an exhaust rattle and a wheel bearing. So I'm gonna start with a wheel bearing because I feel like that's gonna take the longest. Alright, let's go over a couple tools that I know I'm gonna use on this project. I got my 1/2-inch DeWalt impact. That's the baddest impact I've ever used. With a 21mm, that's to take off the wheel. We got the channel locks would work. I use Nipex brand. They seem to do a lot better. They bite better. Plus their lifetime warranty. We're going to use that to get the cap off for the hub nut. Then we got a die grinder with a wire wheel to clean up the surface after the wheel bearing's out of there. Of course, we're going to want a 3/8 ratchet with extensions and sockets. I got my air hammer, which I usually use to knock the wheel bearing itself out. You don't have to have one of those. You can use a regular hammer or pry bar, or if you're lucky. And a 3/8 impact if I need it. I don't know if I will, but it's there. Now that we got the wheel off, I'm going to take the brakes off. How I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take the caliper bracket bolts off, not the caliper, and then the bracket. Makes it a little easier. Then what we'll do is we'll take some wire or a bungee cord, hang it up to this upper control arm. That'll sit nice and comfortable. And then we'll start working on that wheel bearing. Another quick tip that I always do: jack up the other side, so you can just take this and pivot it around, and it doesn't give you any issues with clearance. You can turn it to get to the back bolts back here. Makes it a heck of a lot easier on yourself. These brake caliper bolts are 18s. Got that wired up, and that's just basically to protect that brake hose in there. If you let that caliper hang, especially with the bracket from the brake hose, you could damage it very easily. Alright, so the next step of the process, you gotta get your ABS harness unclipped from your brake hose. And go follow it all the way up. Unplug it. Alright, so that's unplugged. Get that fish back out. Okay, ABS harness is done. Alright, so next we're going to take off our hub nut, which has got a little cap right here for it. Best way I found to do this: take your channel locks, you bite into it a little bit, tap it. There we go. Take our nut off. It's a 13. Should not be on there very hard. You should, yep. If you're lucky, you can just push this in and out. Otherwise, they can get seized in there, and then it becomes a big pain in the butt. Next step, pull our 18mm wheel bearing bolts off the back. Get this thing rotated so we can get to the other one. Alright, now here's where the air hammer comes into its own. If you can get this thing to rotate, you're pretty much golden. So what you do is you come in on one of these ears and try to get it to rotate. So I'm going to come in at an angle, just like that. Now we just have to get it to tap out. Just grab a normal hammer. Alright. There it is. There's your problem, Dad. Hear that? That's nice. But it's got over 190,000 on it, so it doesn't do. Alright, so now we got the old one out. Go in with a clean rag. Get all this corrosion that's built up in there over time. There's corrosion, there's grease, there's all sorts of nasty crap. Just give it a quick wipe. I don't use any chemicals in here, just in case you do need some of this grease. You don't want it to be thinned out by brake cleaner or whatever. So, inspect your axle shaft. There's a little needle bearing in the end of this, right there. That's what your axle shaft rides on when you're not in four-wheel drive. A lot of times that can go bad and just eat into your shaft right here. You don't want that to happen. Mine looks good. 20 foot-pounds for the axle nut itself, that 13mm nut. I always take some fresh, clean grease, go over this axle shaft all the way around, take some more, and you stick it on that needle bearing that I just showed you inside your new hub. This surface still looks in good shape, but we're going to take our wire wheel, clean it up. One thing you got to pay attention to, this ABS harness, it only goes one way. Usually there's a gap that makes it pretty obvious. Mine went towards the brake caliper, so that's the way I'm going to put it back in. Alright, the last place that you want grease is on this little O-ring right here. That'll make it slide in a heck of a lot easier and seal up a heck of a lot better. That way, when you get this done, your four-wheel drive still works. Kind of wiggle it in, rock it back and forth. You're not going to be able to push this in by hand all the way because of that O-ring. So what I do, I take 2 bolts, go opposite corners, and just slowly rock it back and forth until it's seated nice and tight up against this spindle. Now on these bolts, I don't have a torque specification. I've never used this torque specification. You might yell at me for that, but I just go German tight. If you get that joke, comment below. Just double check. After all, this is what holds your wheel on. Similar to lug nuts, it's very important to get this nice and tight. We're going to take this hub nut, just get it started. You don't need to really torque it down because it's not like a tapered roller bearing where it's pushing those 2 roller bearings together. So what I'm going to do is just go by feel. I've done this many times, never had any problems. Don't yell at me. If you go too much though, you can break your axle right off. And once that's broken off, you're done. You have to go get a new axle. A little bit of pressure there, and that's all it really takes. You don't want to kill the thing. Take your cap, give it a couple taps. There it goes. I'm going to take my ABS harness, feed it through this side so it doesn't get tangled up when we start putting the brakes back on. Put your rotor on. To keep your rotor on, trick that I like, take your lug nut. I put it on backwards just because it's got a flat surface. Just get it finger tight, that'll hold your rotor on. Now I'm going to cut my brake caliper and bracket free, get that installed. Again with these, you want to go German tight. Run your ABS harness right back up your brake hose. last thing we gotta do is put this wheel back on. That's done. We'll go take it for a test drive. I'll report back to you after that. Alright, we just got back from our test drive. Here's the tools that you need to complete this job the way that I did it. We've got our hammer and our channel locks. Those are to remove the hub cap for the hub nut. We've got a ratchet wrench, a really long one with a nice offset at the end. That is for the brake caliper and the wheel bearing bolts themselves. This I use just to clean up the surface of the spindle where the wheel bearing meets. And then some side cutters to cut our brake caliper loose. A 13mm with a short extension. That's just for the hub nut. And a little bit of wheel bearing grease. Oh yeah, and our impact. Thanks again for watching. Part 2 is going to be that blower motor resistor. I'll show you how to do that. Pretty simple process again. For those of you who are curious on what happened to the exhaust, there it is right there. That's a hanger, it just broke off. I'm just going to take my grinder, clean it up, weld the crap out of it, and it should be good to go.